Nebraska didn't play, but it was an amazing college football Saturday. At least it was for me. All the games I was taking, not all of them, but most of them hit. So I had a positive weekend in the betting category. I got to hang out with my dad. We watched a bunch of games together at my apartment after just going to Lincoln together for the Michigan game a week ago. So very positive overall. I got to watch teams I liked win. One being not Penn State. Sorry, I do like Penn State. They didn't win. I like Ole Miss a lot. I was wearing my Ole Miss jersey to the bar the other day, and they covered. They dominated. Lane Kiffin is one of my favorite coaches in college football. You guys obviously know that since I've talked so highly of him. But overall, just a really good weekend. So I hope you guys enjoyed yours too. We're back to Nebraska being engaged in a college football week 6. They're going to play a I don't want to like discredit this team, Michigan State, but I don't also want to oversell them and make you guys think that I'm thinking this is going to be a competitive game. I think Nebraska's going to win this by 2 scores. I think they're going to come out fiery. They're going to come out pissed off. They're going to overmatch them on both sides of the ball. And I think this is a game where Nebraska wins by double digits, 10 plus. I think they're going to cover, no problem. I think Michigan State is still in the building phase. They don't have the line to compete with Nebraska. Not that Nebraska has some spectacular line, as we know. But overall, this should be a good weekend for Nebraska to bounce back after the loss and really get them started for what should be a positive October. Nebraska is going to be in position to go undefeated this month. So there's just a lot to look forward to as a Nebraska fan. Now, the last time you saw me, I was a little frustrated, a little bit upset, but it was an emotional day. I was so defeated. I went back and looked at myself during the post-game reaction against Michigan, and I mean, first off, give me credit. I was out all night the night before. Then that whole day, my social meter was drained. We'll just put it that way. And then to have Nebraska lose, that was heartbreaking. So I was pretty beat up. But now I'm in a much more realistic and optimistic state. I'm excited for what's to come, and I'm a believer in what Matt Rule preaches. So again, this is a team who can win 9 games, which would exceed our initial expectations, or what should have been the expectations, which was 8-4, right? Making some sort of a minor jump, but they can still make a big one. So welcome to the show. Happy to see you guys. Haven't talked to you in a few days. I had a work trip to go on right after the Nebraska game last weekend. So I went to St. Louis, random city, I know. I was there with my friends for about 5 days, 6 days. Missed my flight. I didn't miss it. Flight got canceled because there was a storm in Phoenix on Friday night, and I had to take the next flight out Saturday morning. Now, if you know me, I really enjoy watching every single game. On Saturday, I wake up at 9 a.m. Pacific time. I watch them all the way through. I pay attention to all my bets, and I just, enjoy my entire day from 9 a.m. to 10 or 11 p.m. when it all wraps up. And I was unable to do that because I had to take 2 flights. One at 5 or 6 a.m. from St. Louis to Chicago, then a delay or a layover in Chicago because of that initial delay in Phoenix, and then fly all the way home. And I didn't get back to like 1:30. So fortunately, I was able to watch some of the games on the plane, but not ideal for a college football Saturday. Very rare that I wouldn't be at home on my couch or at a stadium watching games. Jim, thank you for being here. Thank you for the 1177. He says the next 2 opponents are way better than I expected. Both have mobile QBs. Stay healthy. Yeah, that's the one threat that Michigan State poses. They actually have a mobile QB. Everybody else on their team is pretty mid, but the mobile QB could do damage. I think this will be a competitive game going into the 3rd quarter, but then from there, Nebraska should be able to separate. And if they can't, I'm going to readjust expectations, because if you're not beating teams like Michigan State, who are bottom of the barrel Big Ten teams, at home, and they're just not where we expect them to be yet. The Maryland game is the one that I'm going to be really excited for. Maryland has a really good QB, I think even better than the Michigan State QB. They obviously dominated against Wisconsin, and that should be a really exciting one, especially since it'll be on the road. I just found out I won't be able to watch that game. Painful, Jim. I'm going to the Red River Shootout, Texas, Oklahoma. The game start in Dallas is the exact same time as the game start for the Maryland-Nebraska matchup. So unfortunately, I'll have to watch it back. My first time missing a Nebraska game on TV or in person, man, years. I don't remember the last time that happened where it overlapped. It might have been like 2019, so 6 years ago, where I didn't get to watch a Nebraska game at the time it was played. Insane is what it is. I gotta enjoy my life and go to the River Shootout at some point. GBR14, thank you for the $5 super chat. He says thoughts on Quentin Ives being the running back 2 that Rule was alluding to in his press conference today. Seems like a bit of a secret they can't share. Yeah, I didn't really understand that, and I think they want to just keep everything under wraps now that they're trying to reevaluate some stuff at different positions. I don't know. Was it Quentin Ives that they're alluding to, I just automatically assumed, based on how he's played the last few weeks, that Quentin Ives is going to step into that role. So it doesn't feel like it needs to be that much of a secret. You can pretty much guess it if you've been watching Nebraska's games. The other one that was interesting was the offensive line shakeup, and I just took that as Elijah Pritchett's going to be the starting left tackle. Gatula's getting bounced out. Who knows if there's going to be a little shakeup at the interior spots? I wouldn't expect there to be. So it's really Elijah Pritchett, who they're probably working with over these past 2 weeks to make sure that he's dialed in, doesn't have the false start issues, doesn't commit any penalties. Because if you're going to win the big games, you need your best players out there. And when you're paying a tackle as much as they're paying him, he needs to be on the field. He can't be sitting on the bench just because he makes, brain dead plays. So hopefully the offensive line gets tightened up. But in general, this team got beat by one of the best teams in the Big Ten when they played against Michigan. And now that Penn State lost the way they did, the Penn State loss to Oregon was similar to the Nebraska loss to Michigan. The score looked really close, and it could have gone either way in both of those games. But there was a defining moment in that game where I looked at the screen and said, okay, the quarterback on Oregon's team is much more accurate. He's much more poised. He's more confident than Drew Aller is. And their offense just hummed, right? Their defense played pretty consistently. And you couldn't say that about Penn State the entire way through. So Penn State 9 out of 10 times would lose that game is what it felt like. And that's probably aggressive. They'd probably lose that game 7 out of 10 times. And it's a similar thing you can say about Nebraska with Michigan. So I'd say that Nebraska played a really tough team, and so did Oregon, or so did Penn State. And I would say Michigan's one of the top teams in the Big Ten after watching that happen. I think Michigan's actually better than Penn State, which didn't think that 2 weeks ago. I'll tell you that. Big Red Fever says, I love me some corn craze. Well, thank you for being here, bro. It's been a week, so I'm glad I can be back to making content. Dom Dom says, hey, St. Louis is my hometown. I'm from Duluth, and I'm proud. Nice. I stayed near downtown, near St. Louis University, and we went to some fire dinners out there. There were some really good restaurants, so that was positive. I really liked that part of it. And we met some really good people. So outside of that, St. Louis, a little different from where I grew up, but make it work. Caleb says, Nebraska needs a better run defense. If we want that big jump this year, our defense needs to wake up and score in the red zone. I agree with that. Offense really needs to score in the red zone. That's what I'm most concerned about. The offense needs to get into position to score, not settle for field goals, and punch it in, because that's been Nebraska's Achilles heel the last few years. Emmett, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, who do you think the running back 2 would be? Also, would you give the Tunnel Walk Talk a new channel for Nebraska content? A shout out. Well, there's the shout out, brother. I've never heard of it, but nice. That's awesome. They got a new show. We can never have enough Nebraska shows. Who do you think running back 2 would be? I just assume Quentin Ives. Quentin Ives looks like the best for the 1-2 punch. Quentin Ives is the replacement to Dante Dowdell, and they don't need more shifty guys like Emmett. They need someone who they can hand the ball to on the inside who can punch it forward. So you would hope that it's going to be Quentin Ives, but we'll see. You never know. The other day, thank you for the $2 super chat. Thank you for being a member. He says, do you expect Pritchett to start at left tackle? I 100% expect him to be in the starting lineup. Yeah. After what Rule said today, and they're going to wait to reveal it, and the depth chart on offense obviously didn't change, Pritchett's got to be up there. And they know it. They know that when you're going to go out and pay a guy that much money and you're going to expect to get X amount of production out of him, that he needs to step up and play his part. So I'm hoping that he does. I'm hoping that the offensive line looks better with him in. And if you're going to go and beat USC, and you're going to beat Iowa, and you're going to beat Penn State, then you need to have your best players on the field. That's the bottom line. As we all know, this isn't anything new. Joe says, Connor, good seeing you at the Michigan game, GBR. Good seeing you too, and your dad, Joe. I went to Barry's the night before the game. Saw a lot of people. Like Nebraska fans who I've met through this channel or who knew who I was, which was really fun. It's always fun to go to Nebraska and meet people who've watched my content because, there's a lot to talk about. So that was positive. And then I went out to Barry's the next night after the game too. So overall, Nebraska experience, whether they win or lose, fantastic for me. It's a 10 out of 10. So I had fun. David says, can we talk about how awful a true freshman is? Absolutely awful. Isn't he a true freshman? Let me double check that real quick. What a crazy comment. Rex Guthrie. He's a redshirt freshman. So he's a redshirt freshman, barely played. He's getting snaps, and he's got legitimate NFL scout hype where people are saying that he could play in the NFL, and we're talking about he's overhyped. David, I just don't agree with this. I'm sorry. He's young, he's inexperienced, he's being thrown into the fire, and he actually has played well against competition that was up to his level. When he plays against better teams, obviously there's going to be some mishaps, but no, I can't bash Rex Guthrie. That's still TBD on how good he's going to be, you know? Talking about this week in college football, because it was a freaking great week. I want to start off with Cincinnati, since, there was a lot of Cincinnati disrespect after Nebraska beat them, and I didn't think it was justified. Before the Cincinnati game, I felt like Nebraska had the superior team. I felt like Cincinnati was going to be inferior at the skill positions and on the offensive line. I also wasn't as confident in their quarterback. Watching them play after the game, I told you guys, I think this is a Cincinnati team that's a lot better than we thought they were going to be. That line was way too big. 6.5 points for Nebraska in the very first game against a legit Big 12 team didn't make sense. Hindsight's 2020. But now you've seen it. Cincinnati's gone on to dominate in their following games. And what's his name? Brendan Sorsby led a massive comeback, like a 75-yard drive, to beat Kansas on the road this week. And now going against Iowa State, who just dominated this weekend against Arizona, who's undefeated, top 15 in the country. They're a 1.5-point favorite in that game. And I full-heartedly believe Cincinnati's going to win that game. I also think they're going to win the following game against UCF and the game against Oklahoma State, which would put them at, 6-1 going into this back end of the stretch, a legitimate Big 12 contender. Think about that. People shit on this Nebraska win, and now you're starting to see, wow, Cincinnati might actually be better than we thought. Let me see this one thing I pulled up for Cincinnati. One sec. Where is it? Here it is. Brendan Sorsby. He's the highest graded starting quarterback in college football right now. And if you look at his stats, where did I pull up stats at? Did I pull those up? That's standings. Let's go stats right here. Sorsby's thrown for over 1,000 yards, completing 69% of his passes. Remember, Nebraska held him to 69 yards passing that game. Totally shut down their pass defense. Totally shut down Cincinnati, which I thought was really impressive. So shout out to Nebraska just being dominant in general. We're going to come back to stats in a second. There were a couple other things that I thought were interesting this weekend, a couple other games in the Big Ten. You had the Penn State one that we obviously touched on. Here's the reality about Penn State, my official opinion on them. Penn State is a good team, but they are not a great team. They have two things holding them back. Number one is James Franklin. Number two is Drew Aller. The fact that they let Bo Perbula leave. Bo Perbula is one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC now. He's at Missouri. Missouri's obviously a top 25 team, and they play Alabama next week. I actually think Alabama is going to lose to Missouri next week because I think Alabama is going to beat Vandy this week, and they're going to have a little bit of a hangover after back-to-back massive matchups. Doesn't matter, but let's get back to Penn State. Drew Aller being the quarterback at Penn State, when we have repeatedly seen that he doesn't have the clutch gene, right, makes no sense. James Franklin went all in on him. Unfortunately, it did not work out. And we now know Penn State is who they are, and nothing is changing. I watched Josh Pate talk about it last night. He said, this is kind of a defining moment for Penn State. It's going to go one of two ways. Way number one is Penn State's going to rebound off this. They're going to learn their lesson. They're going to be a totally different team, and they're going to go off and get to the playoff and be a really strong Big Ten contender in the playoff. That's one way. Number two is they fold. And this is kind of the downfall of James Franklin. It's the downfall of Drew Aller. Penn State goes on to lose a couple more games this season. They don't make the playoff. And then obviously things unravel, unwind, and they're looking for a new coach, or who knows what happens at Penn State. I'm kind of split on that. I think it could go either way. I think Penn State has made a living beating up on shitty teams and getting to 9 or 10 wins every year because of that. And then when they get into a big moment like this one against Oregon or like against Ohio State they play every year, they end up losing those. So I am not a believer in Penn State right now. I don't think they're as good as Michigan is. I think this is a better matchup for Nebraska because I think they can take advantage of a quarterback who's not got that clutch gene the way that Bryce Underwood might have, and he's not going to run like Bryce Underwood would. So I think this is actually a game that Nebraska is going to be competitive in, which I'm really excited now about going into the end of the season. Indiana and Iowa. Indiana was so hot after that Illinois win. Everyone was picking them, 9-point spread, who cares? I, on the other hand, was not. You always have to regress to the mean, which they did. Iowa almost won this game. And credit to Indiana. They went to Iowa. They played against, what do you call Iowa? A decent team? Are they a 7-winner? Probably 7-win team. So they played against a decent Iowa team. They played okay throughout the game, but their offense was not that effective. They did shut them down on defense for the most part. And at the very end, when Iowa was going to put the dagger in their heart to finish them off, Indiana makes sure they don't make the field goal. Now, that was on the kicker, but we'll just say Indiana psyched them out. The difference between Indiana and Nebraska in these spots is Indiana actually found a way to beat Iowa in that mucky, slutty game, and Nebraska wasn't able to in any of the last 3 of the last 4. So Indiana survived that. Indiana's still a legit team. I was talking to my friend today about it, whether you'd have a 10-2 Nebraska or a 10-2 Indiana get into the playoff. And right now he's leading Indiana, getting in at 10-2. I think it really depends how they perform at the end of the season. But imagine a scenario. Obviously, this is all fantasy land. We don't know what's going to happen. Imagine a scenario where you've got 5 Big Ten teams who are all 10-2, because it's possible that happens. Who gets in? Who doesn't? We'll have to see. But I think Michigan is going to surprise some people. I think Michigan's going to pull a couple upsets, like an Ohio State win. They'll beat US. They could beat USC. Going to be interesting. USC played Illinois. They lost that. Illinois, who knows what to think of them. A little bit of inconsistency, but I still think they're a team that could win 9 games this year. And what else? Minnesota beat Rutgers barely. Northwestern got their first win against UCLA. Meant nothing, but that's the Big Ten. Big Ten is pretty simple. We know who these teams are for the most part, and you've kind of got the few at the top. If we look at the Big Ten, where is it? Big Ten standings. Let's talk about who are legitimate contenders in this conference right now. Indiana, legitimate contender. Oregon, legitimate contender, arguably the best team in the country. Maryland, not a contender. Ohio State, contender. Michigan, contender. Minnesota, no. USC, no. Illinois. I wouldn't say Illinois is a contender. You don't get blown out by 40 points and then say you're a contender. So Illinois is not, Iowa's not, Nebraska right now is not. Penn State, we'll still consider them a contender. I put them on the outside looking in, though. I'd say the real contenders are these 4: Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan. And then in the second rung, you would have a Penn State, Nebraska, USC. That's probably my second rung. Interesting that those are the few who can make it. Those are the few who I believe will be in contention. If we go to the ACC, we're just going to talk about all the contenders from each conference after 5 weeks because, we're 5 weeks in now. We have a better idea. Georgia Tech is a contender. They should have lost this weekend. They got bailed out. I was happy they got bailed out because I had a money line in a parlay. But Georgia Tech's a contender. The only other contenders in this conference right now are Miami and Florida State. And this week's going to tell us a lot about Florida State. If Miami beats Florida State on the road, it's going to say Miami's probably the best team in the country, or one of them, one of the top 2. And if Florida State pulls that upset, then we're really seeing that there's not that much disparity between the top teams in this conference. Georgia Tech still has to play one of these teams, I think. Is it Florida State? No, they don't have to play Florida State. They have to play Miami. Bang, bang. No, they don't play either of them. Never mind. So Georgia Tech just needs to win out, and they could get to the ACC championship game. Wow. So this is a big game this weekend for those two. In the SEC, the contenders, we'll go Big 12 first because it's right in front. Big 12 contenders. Iowa State's technically a contender. They're undefeated. I think Iowa State lose this week. And if they don't lose this week, they're going to lose another week. But they can still get in to that Big 12 championship game like they did last year. Arizona State's a contender for that. BYU, you could argue, is. I'm not as high on them. And Texas Tech. I'd say and Cincinnati. So you'd really have Cincinnati, Texas Tech, ASU, and Iowa State right now. Those are my contenders for the Big 12 to make the playoff. Make the championship and then get a spot in the playoff. In the SEC, Ole Miss, I talked about them a minute ago. Freaking love them. You've got Ole Miss, contender. Missouri, as of now, contender. Vandy, I don't know how you say they aren't a contender. We all know that their lines aren't as dominant and they don't match up talent-wise to all these teams, but they just find a way to win. Oklahoma, contender. A&M, contender. Bama, contender. Georgia, contender. Beyond that, I do not think LSU, Tennessee, and Texas are contenders. I think Texas is kind of a fraud. I don't know why they're still ranked this high. Tennessee's good, but I think they're going to have a tough stretch down the road. It's going to be hard for them to win all these. They've got to go to Bama, then they've got to play OU. They've got to play at Florida, which is a rivalry game, and then they play Vandy at the end. So tough for them. But that gives you an idea of who I think the real teams are, who's really competing for a playoff spot right now. Jim, thank you for the 7-11. He says, I think Pritchett will go to right tackle. Gunner will move to his natural left tackle position. Score prediction, Nebraska 35, Michigan State 10. I like the score prediction. I don't think Gunner will be in the starting lineup. Gunner got abused against Michigan, and I think he gets pulled out. That's my guess. Gunner Gatula probably gets pulled back. They leave Teddy Prohaska in on the right edge, on the right tackle spot. And then you have Teddy and Elijah Pritchett as the 2 starters. That's the guess, but I'm not sure. Jason says, I want to see us dominate Michigan State. We're double-digit favorites, and we need to cover GBR. Nebraska needs, I don't want to take away from what you just said. I want to make sure we emphasize what you just said. Nebraska needs to dominate. Number one, They need to remind themselves who they are. If this is a team who is going to compete for the Big Ten this year, compete for a playoff spot, you have to win the games you're supposed to win, and you have to do it in a decisive fashion. Michigan State is coming in, and in the past, Michigan State's been a thorn in Nebraska's side. Go back a couple of years ago, I think it was 2023, Heinrich Harburg and Jeff Sims were the quarterbacks. The backup QB at the time was Sam Levitt at Michigan State. He came in, he had a good game, and Michigan State ended up beating Nebraska that day. Nebraska was a 7+ point favorite on the road. Michigan State, I think, had just fired their coach, if I'm not mistaken. And anyway, my point in saying that is Michigan State's been a thorn in the side. It's always a close game, but they don't have the team makeup to compete with Nebraska right now. So if Nebraska plays their game and they play to their best of their ability, they should win this game by 14 points. The same way USC did. Keep in mind, USC was a 19-point favorite against them 2-3 weeks ago, and they ended up winning that game by 14. I think Nebraska needs to come out and do that too. I saw the Kelly Ford rankings. Let me see. I'm going to pull this up. So this gives you an idea of where they rank the teams Nebraska's played so far. Cincinnati's the 35th ranked team in the country. Michigan's the 12th ranked team in the country. Nebraska is the 20th ranked team in the country. Michigan State is 65. Nebraska should be able to go in here and just power through. Power on defense, get to their quarterback, don't let him run wild on you, and then score points at will. They've got the 69th ranked defense. They have no pass rush. Dylan's going to have all time to throw. It's going to be nothing like that Michigan game. This is one of the easiest games in the entire month of October. Maryland, Minnesota after that, and then Northwestern, who they rank as the 76th best team in the country. So obviously Northwestern's the easiest game in this month, but Michigan State's really easy too when you compare it to Minnesota and Maryland. I was talking to my cousin about it today. He's like, I'd be more surprised by Nebraska upsetting Penn State than I would be Michigan State upsetting Nebraska. And I asked him why. His response was, well, history tells you that Nebraska loses in spots like this. History tells you that Nebraska loses to shittier teams and they don't get up for these games and they're not going to be able to pull through, and it's either going to be super close and go down to the end even though it shouldn't, or something bad's going to happen. Even though the Penn State spread should be the exact same as this Michigan spread, 10 or 11 points. So in theory, the Nebraska upset over Penn State would be the exact same as the Michigan State upset over Nebraska. You'd be surprised by both, but he was arguing, no, history says this is going to be a close game. I don't agree with that. I think the new team makeup is different. If you watch the way Nebraska played against Michigan, did you see them quit? I hear silence. I'm going to guess no. Nobody on that team felt like they were out of that game. There was one thing I saw after where people were posting saying that the Michigan sideline was way hyped up in the fourth quarter and the Nebraska sideline wasn't. Okay, I get that. Michigan had a lead at that point. You had the sideline going crazy, and Michigan really wanted to get the juice going because they wanted to close it out. But Nebraska still felt like they could win. They fought to the end. Heinrich Harburg had that touchdown. Obviously, Dylan Raiola led the drive. They went for the onside kick. Wasn't there, but if they would have gotten it, do you count on them to kick a field goal and take it to OT? I would have. So that's a game where Nebraska's just so damn close, and I'm confident in them being able to turn the corner. That's kind of the point. They've already proven that they're going to fight. They've already proven that they're not going to give up. They've proven that they've gotten rid of the outside noise, the self-doubt, and the belief that we're going to find a way to lose this game, and they've turned it into, we need to find a way to win, right? That's why I'm a bigger believer in Nebraska closing out this one against Michigan State and not having that history come up and bite them in the ass. Not having the history say, well, yeah, it's a 10-point spread and Nebraska's supposed to win this game, but you're not going to because you're Nebraska and you constantly let it slip away. I think I made my point. Hope you guys understand it. But yeah, some people are, they're not going to be believers this week. They're going to think this spread's too big. They're going to think Nebraska can't win against these teams. And they're going to think Nebraska's going to eke this one out by 3 or some BS. I am not a believer in that idea right now. I saw this, the Big Ten power rankings from the Big Ten Huddle. I just see them on Twitter a lot. I see them post, and I like their graphics. Here's what their thought is on their power rankings. Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. I love that as the top 3 right now, and I would not debate that at all. They have Penn State, Illinois, and Michigan. I would debate this heavy. Michigan is my number 4, right behind Indiana. I would put Penn State as my number 5. Illinois is my 6. USC is my 7. And I would right now put Nebraska as my 8 above Washington and Iowa. I do not think Washington or Iowa are deserving of those spots. I think Nebraska's further along in their rebuild. I think Nebraska's more talented on both sides of the ball than either of these two teams. And I think Nebraska's the 8th best team in this conference. I would follow that up with either Maryland or Washington behind Nebraska, with Iowa behind probably both of those teams. Then I'd move to Minnesota, and the rest of this is all junk. None of these teams are competitive. None of these teams, I don't think any of them are going to make a bowl game. Maybe one does. Maybe a Michigan State or a Rutgers sneaks in, but these are all teams who are down bad. So I think Nebraska's not getting enough credit. Penn State's getting too much credit. Michigan is much better than expected, and they very well may be the 3rd best team in this conference. TBD, we're going to find out really quick, just so I know, because I have not checked on their schedule. What's Michigan looking like? Michigan plays Wisconsin this week. They're a 16.5-point favorite. I am taking Michigan in that game. I think they're going to dominate Wisconsin. They play at USC at night. I have a suspicious feeling that USC is going to steal this game. Michigan should win it. Michigan's the better team, but it's at USC at night. It's a revenge spot. USC has the talent profile to win. It's going to be really tough. If Michigan wins, it's going to confirm my idea about them right now, what I'm telling you, that they're the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, but USC could find a way to squeak it out. And then after that, Michigan's got nothing. Washington at home, Michigan State on the road, Purdue at home, Northwestern on the road, Maryland on the road, and then the big one, Ohio State at home. Michigan's a really intriguing team this year. Much better than we initially thought they'd be. And if you looked at how Nebraska played with their true freshman quarterback and you look at how they finished their season, he got better as it went on. What's going to happen to Bryce Underwood? He's going to get better as it goes on. Michigan's in a good position. Winning that game against Nebraska was massive for them. Sorry, I'm reading the chat and I just mixed my words. Let me see. Emmett, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $5 super chat. I don't think Aller is a good QB at all. He's very flawed. My score prediction on the content channel was 42-14. I don't have any faith in the Michigan State defense. I do think Michigan State's going to be able to score more than that. If Nebraska puts up 42 points, Michigan State's going to be able to score 21, 24, something like that. I don't know that Nebraska will score that much. I hope they do. I hope Nebraska just runs it up. I think they get to 35, but 42 is a lot. I like the prediction, though. I can get behind you on Nebraska winning by double digits, 100%. And I don't agree. I do agree with you. Aller's not a very good QB. He lacks the clutch. I saw this thing on Twitter today. It's inappropriate, so I'm not going to pull it up. But if you're a degenerate or if you are into dark humor, you can go look up what he had to say to some girl in the DMs. But he's not a good enough quarterback to be firing off DMs like that to girls. If you guys saw it, you got to win games. You got to not throw interceptions that way. You got to not have a girlfriend. Like if you're going to have a girlfriend and you're going to fire off DMs that are crazy to other chicks, you got to win games. And Drew Aller does not have the I'm trying to think of the right word, the resume right now to go and DM girls crazy the way he apparently does. Saray, thank you for the $2 super chat. Was the Heisman standing with Raiola #1 a hoax? So it's a good question. That's a really good question. It wasn't a hoax. So it was on Polymarket. So Polymarket, hold on, let me just pull up the FanDuel Heisman odds for you really quick. Polymarket is a different betting site. And the way it works is that, like what that graphic was trying to say, it was trying to tell you what the increased percentages are on people betting on certain players or on Dylan Raiola or whatever. I got to type in my FanDuel code, one sec. 6086. So it's trying to tell you how much more increased value there is on Dylan Raiola, or really decreased value because people are betting on him. And so it's not necessarily saying that he's a leader in the Heisman. It's saying that people who are betting on the Heisman are picking him more than they're picking any other player. Does that make sense? So this is the Heisman odds currently, and you'll see Dylan is not at the top of this list. Leading is Dante Moore. Ty Simpson's right behind him. Carson Beck, who right now, Carson Beck has a lot of value. If you're a believer that Miami is going to go beat Florida State, I would bet on this Carson Beck play right here. Jeremiah Smith, Trinidad Chambliss, Fernando Mendoza, Julian Sayin, Diego Pavia, which is crazy. I'll tell you what, Diego Pavia beats Alabama this week, and this moves to plus 1,000, maybe plus 900. Diego Pavia jumps into the top 3 with a win over Bama. Not saying it's going to happen, but it would be incredible. It'd be Johnny Manziel all over again. You see all these players, okay? But have you seen Dylan Raiola yet? No. Dylan Raiola is all the way down here behind Bryce Underwood, behind Drew Aller, Jordan Tyson, Miller Moss, and then you get Dylan Raiola. Same odds for Dylan Raiola as Thomas Castellanos, Sawyer Robinson, and Josh Hoover. The disrespect to compare him to Sawyer Robertson. Anyway, at plus 8,000 odds, you could bet 100 on this to win. I'm going to show you guys. Just get excited. $8,000. So if you're a believer in Dylan Raiola and you think Nebraska's going to go out and win the games they're supposed to, when I say the games they're supposed to, it's the games they're favorited in. Okay? They're going to be the favorite this week. They're going to be the favorite next week at Maryland. They're going to be the favorite against Minnesota. They will be the favorite against Northwestern. That would get Nebraska to what? 7-1. Then they play USC. If they are 7-1, I would argue that they will be the favorite in that game. USC likely has a loss coming to Notre Dame or to Michigan. That puts them at a 2-loss. Nebraska would be a 1-loss. Nebraska's at home. Nebraska wins that game. They are now 8-1. They then have to play UCLA. That would take them to 9-1. Then you have Penn State. If they were to beat Penn State, would you say Dylan Raiola is in the top 5 for the Heisman? I think that's obvious. They would be a 10-1 Big Ten team with 1 game left against Iowa. Dylan Raiola would be in the top 5. It's no question. He would have led Nebraska to a fantastic season. Now, obviously, it's a lot to ask for. I'm not predicting Nebraska to get to 10-1. I'm not even predicting them to get to 9-1 when they go and play against Penn State. I still think there's a loss in there somewhere before they play USC, and I do think they're going to find a way to beat USC at home. But if there was a loss in there before them, I think it would come at Maryland next week or to Minnesota on the road. I just think that's a tricky spot on a Friday night. So I'm not telling you to bet on it. I'm just telling you, when people are talking about those Heisman odds, it's that they're watching the other players around the country start to struggle, like a Drew Waller. They're betting less on him, and they're betting more on players like Dylan Raiola, who've looked a little bit more consistent. That's that. Royal says saying his password out loud. It wasn't my password. It was my one-time passcode. It disappears after 3 seconds, brother. Come on. Don't get me started. Says he thinks that loser mentality's gone. That's what I was saying a minute ago. The loser mentality that Nebraska used to have is over with. They've overcome the nonsense, the belief that they can't win, and they're now in a much more favorable position going into tight games, and they feel like they can win. So I love it. I can't wait. Let's see. Splurge says, what's going on with Malcolm? He's missed the last couple games and probably won't suit up for this one too. He's just hurt, man. It's just is what it is. You got a hamstring issue. It's, hard to come back from. Nebraska's really fortunate to be deep in the secondary. And according to a lot of Nebraska fans, Malcolm Hartzog sucks anyway. So I don't know why people are worried about it. It's a joke, obviously. Being a little sarcastic. But he'll be back eventually. I don't think it's going to be as bad as what we saw with Tommy Hill. Tommy Hill last year missed a couple games, and it was like, well, is he going to come back? Is he going to be good? He had a foot issue that was severe, and it was really hard to come back from that. A hamstring issue I don't think is as big of a deal, but they do want to make sure he's good to go, because if you re-injure that, then you're out for another 3 weeks. What's the point? You got to be 100%. And when you're playing a guy who you have depth around him, you have other pieces you can rotate in, I think they're willing to be more cautious. Their secondary is strong enough without him. And hopefully everything's going to be okay. Let's see. Smoking Cactus says, I think USC is very beatable. 100%. USC, every team on the schedule outside of Penn State is going to match up damn near perfectly with Nebraska. As we learned, Michigan and Penn State, still in my opinion, are going to have the superior lines on both sides of the ball, and it'll be really hard for Nebraska to defend against those. But outside of that, every other team is just like Nebraska. So I'm excited. Saray says Maryland scares me a bit, a lot better than people predicted. They also have a mobile QB, and that always scares me. Even Michigan State this week scares me because of their mobile QB. Yeah, Michigan State scares me that they can score 24 points, 100%. But if Michigan State scores 24 points, Nebraska is scoring 38 or 42 or 45. You have to remember, Nebraska has an offense too. And you're playing against a defense that's going to be, in my opinion, on par with Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's a really good comp to Michigan State. However, I think Cincinnati has a few better skill players, better receivers, better running backs, and actually better quarterback. Cincinnati is a better team than Michigan State. I will say this right now. No question. If you go position group by position group, Cincinnati's better. Cincinnati's a legitimate contender in the Big 12. Cincinnati's going to be the top 15 team this week at home. Michigan State will not make a bowl game most likely, So different teams. the other Dave says, if we beat Minnesota, that'll be a huge step towards separating us from the pack in the middle of the Big Ten. If Nebraska wins their next 3 games, all of the talk comes back to Nebraska's top 25. Can they beat Penn State? Is this the year 3 Matt Rule turnaround? All that comes back. All it takes is winning this week, which they're going to, then finding a way to win the next 2. The next one after this week is tough. Maryland, because it's a road game. You've got a look ahead spot to Minnesota because it's a Friday night. Could be a little tricky for some of the guys to get up for. You never know. This could be a spot where they come out flat. Maryland's they're playing Nebraska. It could be their Super Bowl. Who's Maryland play this week? Who's on deck? Let's see. Scores, Big Ten. Take you through it with me. Maryland's hosting Washington this week. Washington is a 6.5 point favorite. I don't put a lot of stock into that. Washington's good. Washington got absolutely obliterated at home by Ohio State, and they didn't look good at all. Not saying Ohio State shouldn't crush Washington, but there was no positive for Washington. I think Maryland, first off, I'm taking Maryland in this game. Okay. There's no question 6.5 points is too many. Okay. It started at 5.5. Going to 6.5 is crazy. But if Maryland's 5-0, and Nebraska's going in there, they are going to be amped up to get to 6-0. You know what I mean? Maryland could be a tough test. We'll see. Husker Chuck says, if Hartzog stays out until the Penn State game, do you think he would play the last 2 or 3 and then redshirt? I have no idea. I don't know what his redshirt situation is. I don't even know how many games he's played so far. Is it 3? I don't know. I don't think he's worried about redshirt. I think he's worried about playing. And he's been here since 2021. 2022 no 22 23 24 20. Yeah, he's been here since 2022, and he's been a starter the entire time. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Maryland's going to be interesting. I agree with you. Washington will beat up on them though, no question, but it'll be every game in the Big Ten's a battle, as we know. One other thing I wanted to talk about, a big noon kickoff this week goes to Michigan, and I've now lost respect for Big Noon Kickoff. I've lost respect for them, not because of their cast, them bringing on Chris Fallica and Dave Portnoy, and then losing the legitimacy of all these, solid guys like a Matt Leinart, Urban Meyer, Brady Quinn, and Mark Ingram. I lost respect because they're picking shitty games. And why would you go to Michigan when you're playing a Wisconsin team who I would argue is 2 or 3 losses away from firing their coach? Right? And if they aren't, this Wisconsin team's not going to a bowl game anyway. They're just a dead program right now. Why are you going there? It makes no sense. It's not an exciting game. There's nothing fun about it. I guess they're doing it because Dave Portnoy, right? But it makes no sense. Why don't you go to a real game? Now, they could have gone, and I guess how the contracts work is how it is, right? They have to go to a Big 10 game, but they could have gone to a Big 12 game. I would have preferred they went to Cincinnati and Iowa State. That would have made more sense because they go to Big 12 games too. So why do this? This makes no sense to me. College game day, on the other hand, home run. Vandy at Bama. Respect it. Diego Pavia, the second coming of Johnny Manziel. Alabama bouncing back after that loss to Florida State and taking it to Georgia last week. This makes sense. So, yeah, I don't know. Big Noon, lost respect for them. This makes no sense. I'm not watching it. I refuse. I refuse to support nonsense like this, right? So I don't know how you guys feel about it. I'm not watching it. I will watch College game day, though. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just emotional about it. I think I'm just passionate about college football. And when you go to a game that lacks passion because one of the teams isn't going to show up, it's not fun. Don't get me started. It says it used to be Wisconsin, but now Minnesota feels like the monkey we need to get off our backs. 100%. Minnesota on the road's always a freaking problem. That's the monkey. I still feel good about it, though. I still feel like that's a game Nebraska's going to be able to go in and take on and win. They're going to be the favorite, I think. So we'll see. I wonder what the line will be. It's too early to know. Nebraska's got to show up against Michigan State, and then we'll know. I mean, if Maryland beats Washington and they're 5-0, no, they won't. There's no world, unless Nebraska lost to Michigan State. Even then, I don't think there's a world where Nebraska's not the favorite. Even a loss to Michigan State and a win for Maryland over Washington, I think Nebraska's still a 1-point favorite, 2-point favorite on the road. The talent, Nebraska got a way stronger talent profile. Bill says Oregon putting Penn State in their place was the most impactful game last weekend. Indiana beating Iowa, maybe number 2. Minnesota and Illinois showing they can be a threat still this year too. Now it's Nebraska's turn. I don't think Minnesota can be a threat this year. I think Minnesota in a dream world wins 8 games. Dream world. Let's see. Does Minnesota play this week? Yeah, they play against Ohio State. Okay. Here's Minnesota's schedule. Ohio State's a loss. Purdue's a win. They're gonna lose one of these games. It'd be a dream for them to go 2-1 in this stretch. And then they're gonna lose. They could lose. I mean, let's see. 3, 4 wins, 5 wins, 6 wins, 7 wins. Yeah, 8 games, I think, is their ceiling. Minnesota getting to 8 wins would be massive for them. But I could see them losing 3. Ohio State, Nebraska, or 4, sorry. Ohio State, Nebraska, Iowa, Oregon would make sense. Yeah, that put them at 5 losses. That's a 7-win Minnesota team. I still don't think they're a contender. I think Illinois is a legit contender, but Minnesota, not yet. Husker Chuck says he's predicting Nebraska -3.5 versus Minnesota. I agree with that. I think that probably lines up. It could be bigger, depending on what happens in the games before, right? Like if Minnesota looks garbage against Ohio State, and if they lost to Purdue, which I don't know what it is about Purdue. I think Purdue's better than people are giving them credit for. And I know these were ugly losses, but like the USC game, they tried to keep close. The Notre Dame game, they at least scored some points. They had no defense though. I think Purdue could win a couple games here. Like they could, Illinois they're not going to beat, but they could. I'm taking Purdue +10 in this game. They could beat a Minnesota. They will beat a Northwestern. They could beat a Rutgers. They could beat Washington. I think that'd be really hard, but they could. You know what I mean? Like Purdue's on the uprising right now. So interesting team. By the way, I wanted to shout out my friend. You guys remember in the beginning of the season, I had my friend Jake on. He does the professional sports betting. He has like a Discord server. He's had a really hot season. And yesterday, he had a play that was 4 touchdowns in the NFL. So I'm just going to show it to you. Just shout out Jake. This is freaking awesome. He has a lot of winners in his Discord group. But he had Dalton Kincaid, Hunter Henry, Tyler Warren, and Jake Ferguson all to score touchdowns. $200, paid him $21,000. And I told you guys right before he came on my stream before the season, he had a $500 play that paid $42,000. So just off those 2 alone, he's made $62,000 on less than $1,000 bet. Pretty freaking crazy. So shout out Jay. He's doing great this year. He and I bet on all the games every week together. Like we go through all of our picks. Last week I was on Iowa, he was on IU, and he had to pay me for that on Bro Throw. But outside of that, we usually try to ride the same side. We both rode Ole Miss, for example. Loved Ole Miss. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts, guys, on this week. I'm excited to see what happens and what Nebraska does in the bounce back spot against Michigan State. I'm still cautious, you know. I'm not like getting overhyped. Like, oh, if Nebraska beats Michigan State, we're back on that hype train of this is a team that's going to, you know, run the table and be a 1 loss going into USC. I'm still very hesitant to buy in fully, but you know, when you talk about talent, when you talk about the games you're supposed to win, Nebraska should be 7-1 going into USC. And this week's a big week to do it. College Football 360, Subcar, love your content. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for being here. Berkeley says still a Thursday stream. I don't know if we'll do Thursday or we'll do Wednesday. Let me get back to you on that. It's either going to be Wednesday or Thursday. Ideally, Thursday. I'm trying to think what I got going on Thursday. We'll plan for Thursday. I think that's better. Thursday, we're going to talk about the matchup more. We'll talk about Michigan State more. I'd like to get someone who talks about Michigan State on my channel. I'd like to learn from them a little bit. We'll see. But yes, we'll do a stream later in the week. Saray says, I think we have a chance to upset Penn State this year. I just have an odd feeling. 100%. The same way Nebraska had a chance to upset Ohio State last year. Except going into that game, we didn't know they had a chance to. This time, we'll feel like they do. It's exciting. There's hope right now. And that's all that we can ask for. There's hope, and there's reason to be excited. But guys, I'm going to come back Thursday. We'll talk about more about Michigan State. I always have a good time talking to you, hanging out. So until next time, thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.